Welcome everyone to this month's November. Can you believe it's already November? Lunch and Learn with Terry Bean and myself. We are here today to talk about drawing healthy boundaries right in time for the holidays. So, coming off of a big Lunch and Learn this last month where we were discussing burnout, dissatisfaction, and stress. So, we know that tis the season. And Terry, has there been any shifts in yourself, even from our last conversation, that you found?
I've been really mindful of where I'm spending time, conversations that I'm engaged with, and I haven't made it yet, but there is a new meme that has been born inside of me, and that meme very simply says, you do not have to engage in every disagreement you are invited to.
Wow. And it's funny because I've been saying in dealing with difficult people for years, is this the hill that you want to die on?
Sure.
And when I think about that and literally like when we're saying that, it sounds like it's sort of that cliche or anything else, but the reality is we know that prolonged stress, prolonged anxiety has a number of deleterious health effects. So when we are thinking about whether we're going to argue with that person, whether we're going to take up this fight or anything else, I honestly, when I started to incorporate that simple phrase, is this the hill that I want to die on today? It started to become something where I'm like, nope, no, I don't. And I'm just going to let this go and I'm going to move on because somebody else's bad behavior should not be the cause of my personal heart attack. And that's definitely something that I've tried to live by in many cases. But you did mention a word there, Terry, and I want to go back to it. You said mindful. And, when we talked about burnout, when we talked about dissatisfaction and anxiety, mindfulness is one of those pieces. What does being mindful mean to you? And if you're in the audience and you want to put this in the chat, what does mindful mean to you as well? We'd love to have your engagement and see what it is. So, but Terry, go ahead and take that on. What does mindful mean for you?
I'm gonna take a left turn and then I'll circle back, right? I'm gonna do the weave. Evidently, everybody's doing the weave these days, so I'm gonna weave. That'll be my thing now. Mindful for me, one of my signature talks is on mindset matters, and that's what my last book was based on. Mindset matters. And the challenge for most of us is we haven't sat down and prioritized the things in our life where we truly understand that which really matters, that helps us move the needle forward, that helps us maintain self-care, that helps us be present and in this moment. All of these things are really relevant and they're all tied to mindfulness. And the clearer we are on who we are, what we're here for, what we aim to do, it's so much easier to start saying no to the things that aren't that. My phrase is if it isn't a hell yeah, it probably should be a no.
Mm, I like that. And it's this is something that I've always kind of preached anytime that I've done coaching or anything else. When you say yes to something, you are effectively saying no to something else, whatever that is. That could be you're saying no to self-care, you're saying no to another friend, you're saying no to your boss, you're saying no to your own needs, whatever it is. But when we say yes to stuff and we agree to stuff, it ends us putting there's a time cost, there's a trade-off that comes along with that. I want to comment on a few of the pieces in the chat here. I'm loving these answers. By the way, Stuart, I did see not the hill I want to die on, but make sure that they die on it. Too much fire. Pretty funny there. Um, I see being present, presence, being aware and intentional, taking time to separate from everything, centering on peace. I love that, Cheryl. Making the conscious effort, so important, Stuart. Conscious effort to understand how the actions around us. Julie says, listening to. And Francesca says, in the here and now, intentional in thoughts and externalized words and movements. I'm loving those answers. For me, this is something that I've been practicing lately in terms of mindfulness is when I'm feeling like I'm not being particularly present, and it could be even like right now, I might do something as simple as a body scan. Like, okay, where am I? I am sitting in my office. I am sitting in my comfortable white chair, ready to do work. What my one foot is on the floor, one foot's actually up on my knee, and like just like really grounding myself in where I'm at, what my body is doing, how I'm breathing, how I'm showing up, all of those different aspects. I have found that when I take a moment and do that intentional body scan, it kind of recenters me back to whatever the space that maybe that I've just been wandering thoughts or anything else. It really kind of refocuses that attention. I think that's really important when we start thinking about drawing healthy boundaries. And that's really our topic today, because I wanted to bring mindfulness into the space because how often is it that we just say yes without really being mindful about everything else that's going on, what's happening in our world, how many other priorities we have? We just say yes. So I see some other people commenting in the chat. The question, Jesse, was how do you define mindfulness? Yep. Thank you, Terry. And what does it mean to you? Not thinking about work. So let's start there, Terry. And I know that you've said in the past that you're not somebody that has a lot of difficulty with saying no, with being able to draw a boundary or being able to draw that healthy boundary. So, quick show of chat for our audience. We got a good number of audience here. On a scale of 1 to 5, with 1, you say yes to everything, 5, you say no to everything. Where are you in drawing boundaries, drawing healthy boundaries? All right. So, okay, I see. I'm seeing some numbers come through here. So we see a 1.5, a 5 pluses, see a couple of threes, fours, a two. All right. A couple in there. Unless it's an ask from Terry Bean. That's funny, Brenda. I love it. I have the same problem, I think. One is you say yes to everything, or I'm sorry, did I go the wrong way? Yeah. One was you say yes to everything. 5 is you say no to everything. And let's kind of see where we're at there. So, all right. So,
You made an interesting point, and I'll be honest with you. The only reason I got to be able to say no more readily is because I said yes to everything for far too long. At some point, you have to say, wait a second, is this serving me? Is this helping me? Is this working for me? Because one of the things that we get so confused about is being selfish is not the worst thing on the planet, right? Being selfish allows us to give our best to the things that really need us to show up for. But if we're selfless in being here, there, everywhere, all things to all people all the time, we really spread ourselves too thin. And that's the real disservice to people.
no, I agree with that 100%. And it's interesting. So, I'm going to share with you, and for those of you in the audience that want something to read, and you're going to love this, it is called The Myth of Normal. Okay. And I just finished this book. It's by an author named Dr. Gabor Mate. And he talks about sort of like how we've normalized certain things, how we've normalized social media, how we've normalized how we show up at work or what we say yes to, and so on and so forth. And one of the really, really fascinating pieces that's coming through in the literature right now is oftentimes when we have difficulty drawing a boundary, saying no, or really kind of focusing on ourselves, that actually stems from our childhood. And in many cases, a lot of people that have very big difficulties in saying no were oftentimes they found themselves in positions where they had to say yes constantly as a kid. They didn't get to draw a boundary. They felt like they always had to do things for other people, in which case that behavior patternized inside of the brain and it continues to move into our forward adult life, is that Well, if we say no, we're worried about upsetting an adult or upsetting our caretaker. Or if we say no, we feel like we're not going to be loved or we're not going to be appreciated for who we are. So we end up as children oftentimes saying yes and saying yes and saying yes. We don't really get a choice in some cases, like because I said so. And all of a sudden, we don't have that agency. And that pattern of behavior really gets stuck in our personality because our personalities develop from, up to around the age of 6 in most psychological literature. Now, there's good stuff saying that we can actually shift, we can change those pieces, but it does take a lot of work. So, what do you think on that, Terry? When you were a child, and we're not going to put you on the couch or anything here. We don't have to, talk about relationships. But when you were a child, were you given that ability to sort of say no, or to drive your own adventure, or to be able to kind of navigate? I mean, obviously, there's still some boundaries that our parents always draw for us, but did you have some of that option?
So it's a little bit of column A and column B for me, right? I grew up as an only child, even though I have three half siblings. My parents were divorced when I was really tiny. So if I was with parental units, the yes typically got some level of reward, which reinforces the behavior of saying yes. The reality is, I spent so much damn time alone that I was like many latchkey kids of the 70s, had so much autonomy and was able to make my own decisions. So as a result, I grew up, and my wife will be the first one to tell you that I am relatively selfish because I'm used to being the master of my own little destiny. And because I had to be, there was nobody else to take care of it. So I love that question. And I don't feel like I'm on the couch sharing that. But it is an interesting dichotomy to be familiar with both worlds. And ultimately, I go back to this idea. Lisa Nichols famously stated that you can't pour from an empty cup. And so being able to take control of our life, of our time, of our energy, and to be protective of those things, I think is really a great practice in mindfulness, where we're spreading that energy, where we're putting it, who we're giving it to, who we're allowing to tap into it. It becomes such a powerful idea that I'm so excited that we're having this conversation, because it's a game changer, not only for Thanksgiving dinner, like I've joked about on the social media, but just in every aspect of our lives. How about you? I know you've got a sibling or two. How did that show up in your world?
It's interesting that you asked that because this was something that I kind of went back and discovered. I am very, very good at keeping my own company. And what I mean by that is a lot of people look at me and they're like, wow, you're the most extroverted person because they see me on stage or they see me speak or they see me in conversations. And I do. I come off very, very extroverted. But I'm actually highly introverted, and a lot of people don't realize. I call myself an ambivert, I guess it would be, and even on the psychological scale. So the Neo PIR, the top level personality assessment, clinical diagnostic, I show very high on extroversion, but in reality, I absolutely, once I'm on stage or once whatever, after I get off, I really need some like kind of quiet time or anything else to go back into myself. And when I was having conversations with my therapist, I would say, I don't know, maybe about 2 years ago, it's just like, well, how did you show up as a child? And I was like, actually, I was the kid that you could just leave in, you could leave in the bedroom with a set of Matchbox cars, and I would sit and just 100% play with myself. And that sounds terrible, but I would keep my own company, and I was perfectly good to just chill and relax and be present with my own imagination. And what I think that ultimately ends up meaning for me was I became much more self-sufficient and independent in that regard. So I'm going to say this. I'm going to challenge the notion of selfishness. I want to take away, because as a behavioral scientist, one of the things that I like to do is behavior is not good or bad, it is consequential. and it has positive consequences and it has negative consequences. The word selfish has so much baggage that comes with it is it creates this shame or this guilt if we start to really kind of focus on ourselves. So I'm going to challenge that word and say, being self-sufficient or self-driven has consequences. There's positive consequences to that. There's negative consequences to that. Overindulging in self-driven or self-centered behavior, I think, obviously creates the conditions for all of those things that we want to avoid. But underdoing it means that we don't draw healthy boundaries. And when we don't perform in that way, exactly what you said, our glass gets empty. We end up finding ourselves pouring ourselves into everybody else around us. And I think that, one of the things obviously that you and I both teach from the behavioral element side is in everything, balance. We need balance. We need to be able to find that space of saying, I'm not pouring everything into the drive to acquire and working every single moment of my life. I need to fulfill that drive to bond, that drive to defend, that drive to learn. I can't spend my entire time in that drive to bond because I have other obligations. I've got my own learning, my own self, my own self to take care of. So let's challenge that word, Terry. I do see some awesome comments in the chat. I don't know if you were keeping up with those as well, but I see some obligations questions. I see Celeste say, that sounds fun. Sign me up. And I think it's important to say yes to some things. With Terry's a high air, and I know that he agrees. He loves to do things that are novel, exciting, interesting, innovative conversations or activities. So, Terry, do you want to comment on that? Like, what is the defining characteristic that maybe tells you to say yes?
Fun is my watchword, right? If it's not fun, there's got to be something that's going to be beneficial either right now or that I can see down the road. Otherwise, it doesn't happen. And if it's fun, it immediately moves up the stack, right? Am I going to have a good time with this? Oh, well, then hell yeah. That's the hell yeah for me. So I'm a huge fan of fun. Before we dive into the rest of the comments, though, I want to take a look at the word balance that we use very often, work-life balance, and everybody's talking about balance. The thing about balance is it's this, right? Balance is even. I can't get even because I can't see how the camera works, right? And life is never even. And so I have on my arm in Chinese characters, it says harmony because I got that tattoo in 1999 when I had gone through a divorce and wanted my life to be reshaped and I wanted to live a harmonious life. So I'd like to challenge people to not think about balance, but think of all the things playing together like a great symphony. And so not forget balance, that's not going to last for more than 5 seconds, right? But harmony, we can actually, okay, well, we're a little high on the air today. Let's harmoniously shift and be a little earthy, which is Jay knows is hard for me. But it's so we can keep adjusting, and that's what we end up having to do to get through life.
Yeah, we share that challenge with getting into that system and process, my friend. And I love what you said there because it is when I hear somebody say work-life balance, I challenge the word there, and in part because we are to really live an authentic life, you can't separate this is work Jay and this is home Jay and this is this. We are all the same person at any point in time, and being our authentic self is actually one of the ways that we can help navigate things like burnout or dissatisfaction, etc. So, yeah, I love that challenge in that space. Balance doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be perfectly even. I say yes to one thing, I say no to the next, and so on and so forth. It is really about finding that place of harmony. I want to point out, Francesca, and thank you for sharing that, and thank you for the courage to share that. Growing up in grief and as an adult, chosen to do extensive internal work. I really want to point that out, and great kudos to you. That internal work, I think, is a challenge for us sometimes because it is a lot easier to shift and look and say, oh my gosh, my boss just keeps asking all these questions, and my partner just keeps asking all these questions, or this external influence keeps putting all of this on my shoulders. But in reality, it's the internal side of things that is allowing for that to continue. And that internal work that you mentioned there is really about kind of taking ownership over our own authentic self and how we are showing up. So I give you kudos to you. um, Leslie could never say no or was viewed as talking back. How many of us experience that? Absolutely. You know, like, oh, you can't say no. You can't, you don't have agency as a child. But that oftentimes, and this is going to be one of the first tips that I'm going to share in terms of setting a healthy boundary, is we have that script that's playing in us that says we can't say no. People are going to get mad at us, disappointed with us. We're going to let other people down, and we're going to upset other people if we draw our own healthy boundary. So here's my first tip to you. And this is simple. It's going to sound silly, but I really want you to think about this. Get out a piece of paper and a pen. Now, you all remember the old permission slips from school that you had to bring home and you had to get signed. I want you to write yourself a permission slip to say no. I want you got to do it in writing. It has a huge impact on our psychological state when we actually put pen to paper. Don't type it out. Don't do any of that. Sit down, spend 5 minutes, and write yourself a permission slip to set healthy boundaries, to be able to say no when something doesn't serve you, to be able to say no when things are not necessarily healthy for you to say yes to, or anything else, to be able to draw that. If you can give yourself permission, that's one of the biggest first steps that can really be sort of transformational when we start to think about how can I say no to something. So, Terry, what are your thoughts on that?
I think before I jump into that, Francesca's last point here about instead of asking, will they be mad if I say no to this? The question now is, will I be mad if I say yes to this? Yes, Queen. Yes, Queen. That's the question right there. And like, listen, there's so many of us that are others focused and internally motivated. So if you're that type of person, right, where your drive is inside and you don't need to rely on anybody else and you're focused on being a service and helping other people, it's always so easy to say yes. But we have to pull back a little bit. Not in a way that says I'm a no for all the things, but in a way that says there's a better way to help this individual, and I'm going to make that connection. I'm going to make that introduction. I'm going to make that suggestion, but it's not going to take up the same amount of time. When Jay talks about putting together a list of a permission slip to say no, to give yourself the comfort in saying it, I think that's absolutely important. I also think it might be valuable to add to, on the flip side of the permission slip, the list of things that you want to say no to but can't. And, like, listen, there's a lot of shit we have to do for work that we don't necessarily want to say yes to. But it turns out we do want to say yes to getting paid. So we have to have that priority level, right? And understand that there are things that are going to trump the things. And so once you really start mapping that out and thinking through it, their decision tree that you're going to have becomes so much easier to use that permission slip moving forward. But I highly love that idea.
And Terry, you actually brought up another great point where you said, there's other ways to help. This is another strategy that I have used. Let's just take a simple one. Say my brother calls me and says, "Jay, I've got to move all of this stuff out of my garage," right? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I don't have time for this. Now, if I did have time, of course, and many of the people on here know me, I will literally give up my time for my people, my friends. I will do what I can to support them and help them and everything else. So I do say yes to a lot of things, but I also say no to a lot of things as well. It just doesn't sound like a no. And in some cases, this is the phrasing that I like to use. So, say my brother makes that ask of me, and I say, "Hey, Mark, I would absolutely love to help you, but unfortunately, this weekend I have X, Y, and Z, and I really need to prioritize that. What else could I do to support you?" And I add in that what else could I do to support you? And a lot of times this is where we are allowed to negotiate on our own behalf. Maybe he comes back and says, "Oh, well, uh, no worries," or maybe he gives me a little bit of a hard time, but I'm not going to feel guilty. That's their emotion. They're feeling frustrated because they're coming at it from their own personal place. But I'm not gonna allow myself to hold on to that emotion, right? So, and I'm when I am offering an alternative way to help, could I make a phone call to see if I can get you a storage unit? Could I make a phone call to the U-Haul to help you schedule this or anything else? Can I do that on the app? Could I do something that maybe isn't quite as much of the ask that you're saying? Because I do want to be supportive and helpful. So, in those places, and I'm not saying that we always need to add, how else could I help you? Because sometimes we can just say no. But if you are in that place where you're feeling like that pattern of behavior is always yes, always yes, always yes, try to shift just a little bit. Hey, you know what? I'm not going to be able to do that. I would love to help you. How else could I show you support in this moment?
Those
Let
are
them solve
such
that problem.
I'm sorry. Those are such good training wheels to get you in the habit of saying no to things that aren't meant for you. And that's just it, right? It's saying no is a muscle that you have to work on like everything else. And so finding easier ways to do it, getting in the habit and the practice of doing it, eventually all of a sudden your no becomes a no and you don't think twice about it and you can feel actually really good about it because again what you're saying no to allows you to say yes to more important things down the line.
Yeah, it goes back to I think something that obviously that had come up from what Francesca had said in the chat as well as something that you said. It's about being mindful. If I know in my pit of my stomach, if I feel that when that ask comes to come and make that movement, if the pit of my stomach is saying everything, say no, well, then that's a place to deploy a little bit of that boundary setting. And I did like what you said, on the back of that sheet, maybe script it out. What are the things that I need to say no to? Warren Buffett, I love this. So you want to be more productive? Warren Buffett's approach to productivity. Have you ever heard this? Okay. You create a list of the things that you need to get done, your top 10 things. You then identify the three most important things on that list, and you actively and intentionally avoid the other seven. It's not that you focus on the three, it's you actively and intentionally cut those other seven out. That's how Warren Buffett does his prioritization and his planning, savagely cutting the other things out of there. So, in thinking about that, it's again, it goes back to that mindfulness of a trade-off. Everything we say yes to comes at an opportunity cost.
The
So,
etymology of the word decide is literally to cut off. That's what
hmm,
the word decide means. Think about like an incision when you're cutting, right? And the word the prefix of D is to not do. So decision, decide, cut off from all other opportunities. And it's such a powerful reminder that we don't think about nearly enough.
absolutely. So let's hear from you, audience. Do you have questions? There's the Q&A piece. Toss something into the chat if you have a question there. We want to address your challenges, right? Because Terry, what about those moments? And let's talk about that just a little bit. The power dynamics, okay? Because sometimes we feel like we're in a place of power, and sometimes we feel like we're really stuck, right? Maybe it's the boss and employee relationship. Maybe it is, maybe it is that sort of grandparent or parent that still is asking us to do certain things or to support or anything else like that. When we find ourselves sort of in that power dynamic and maybe we're not feeling as, independent or self-driven as we possibly could be, what would be some of the ways that maybe you would overcome some of that disparity? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think one of the biggest challenges most people have is we think everything is black or white.
Mm.
And the reality is there's 54 shades of gray. There's really, really, really dark white that looks like light, excuse me, really, really, really light white or gray that looks like white, really, really, really dark gray that looks black, and then 52 shades in between. And so when we look at it that way, instead of saying no, we could say not now. We could say not that way, not with you, right? Not at this time. Is there a different way to look at it? So that really helps change, right? So if grandma calls and says, "Hey, I need you to come over and move this box or bring me a cup of milk," or whatever granny needs, you don't have to say no because granny's always going to be a priority. You can reset the expectation. And that, I think, is the biggest challenge for all of us. We have this perceived notion of how things have to be, and we don't ever think about how easy it is to reframe that. So when you open up to the 54 shades of gray, now all of a sudden that no can change into various different tones and tunes and make it easier to accept. And I can't wait to dive into this FOMO
Oh,
conversation.
I know. I saw a couple of great chat pieces come through here. Thank you for those questions, Amanda, Jesse, Celeste. We're going to dig into that. I want to go and just lean into what you're saying there. So often we don't negotiate. We don't have some level of, and I'm going to share kind of a funny story about this. I used to have a faculty member that I worked with, one of my mentors I absolutely adore. Didn't always work all that great with everybody else, but that's okay. Uh, every single day, I would have three, at least three new top priorities. This is the number one priority. This is the number one priority. This, by the end of the week, I had amassed 17 number one priorities. And for a long time, I was it'd be like, this is the new number one priority. Okay, here I go. I'm going to run after that one. And then, 6 hours later, it was, this is the number one priority. And it's just like, okay, I'm going to chase after that. And it wasn't until I sat down and I had amassed my 17 number one priorities of the week and sat down and I looked them in the eye and I said, listen, I want to help you win. I want you to be successful. That's what I'm here for. That's what part of my role is. Here are the things that you've identified as the top 17 priorities of this week. So I'm only going to be able to get a number of these done. Which one of these is the most important to you? That if you had to have one thing wiped off this list with a magic wand, what would that look like? And he was like, well, this one right here. Okay, that's going to take me roughly about 8.5 hours to get done. And that being conservative, I'm going to focus my energy on that one. What's next? And he was like, this one. What's next? This one. What's next? This one. Okay. So I sat there and I literally negotiated out what is your actual number one priorities? What is your time frame on this? What does this look like? Here's the reality is that when we feel like somebody's kind of barraging us with all of these asks or all of these things, we've got to take a step back from ourselves and empathize with that person. What are they doing? They are trying to solve their own internal turmoils, their own internal issues, their own internal traumas. They have that sort of self lens on. If we can take a step back and empathize with that, and I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong. Again, behavior has consequences. Try not to evaluate good or bad. But if that's what they're looking for, if I empathize with that and can take a step back and say, how would I be able to best help this person? Maybe it is by negotiating with them and say, do you think we're taking on too much? Do you think that all of these priorities really are contributing to us getting across the finish line? Could we maybe have a conversation about what is most important or what's not most important? Or if I say yes, I'm going to be able to do that number one priority for you. Here's going to be the trade-off for you is I'm not going to be able to attend this weekend event that you've been planning and so on and so forth because I'm going to need a little of that time for myself if I'm investing all of this time here. Those are negotiations, but we often don't start a negotiation because we feel like it is talking back or we feel like it is saying no. We can do that with grace and humility and really create the conditions. Most people are not as unreasonable as their asks. I want you to listen to that. Most people are not as unreasonable as their asks. They're having a moment. They're having a panic moment. They're having a frustrated moment. They're having I've always gotten away with this and I can always ask Terry because he always says yes. And that's a pattern that we've allowed. The behaviors we tolerate become normal. So take that step back. Remember that they're looking at the world from their position. We need to also look at it from ours and be open to having some of that negotiation. All right, there's Terry. Do you want to swing away at FOMO first?
You know what? I'm trying to come up with an acronym, right? And I'm like, love what you're doing instead, enjoy what's going on now. I'm like, I want whatever the opposite of fear of missing out is, because everything in life, right? Maybe everything's a stretch. A ton of things in life are a trade-off. We have limited time, we have limited energy, we have limited bandwidth. So we're always like, oh, do I want to do this or am I going to do this? So that fear of missing out normally happens because we chose to do this instead. Now, there are times when we're missing out because we didn't want to go, didn't choose to go, couldn't afford to go, didn't like who we were going with, blah, 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 blah. And then we see the post and we're like, oh man, that looks like it's so much fun. That's a thing, and it is hard to replicate that. But ultimately, we have to know that we made the decision, right, to cut this off because we were going to do this instead. And this could be as simple as I am not getting off the damn couch. I'm wrapped up in my favorite blanket, reading my favorite book, eating my favorite bonbons, watching my favorite show. And gosh darn it, that is good enough for me.
So I'm gonna tackle this and follow along with exactly what you said. I've been doing a lot of work in research right now on emotions and how bad we are with our own emotions, let alone emotions in the outside world. Terry, if I was to ask you, what does it mean to be happy versus content?
I think happiness is a state that we float in and out of for most people. I think content is kind of a lower level emotion, and I'm not even sure about this, but you're asking me right on the spot. And so I'm thinking about we can normally feel some level of content and we're cool with how things are, and happiness is a spike along the way. What do you think it is, Mr. Studying Emotions?
No, you did better than I did the first time that was. I was like, I don't know, but happiness is something that it's almost like we chase, right? Like it's an achievement. We become happy when we achieve something or when we do something. And that's what a lot of there's some incredible research on this. We achieve, we become happy. Something happens external, we become happy. Contentment is literally what it sounds like, is being at a state of contentment, regardless of what's happening, whether we achieve, whether we're not, whether we're doing, whether we're not. The fear of missing out is very normal. And I did see Jesse say FOMO is real. It is loss aversion. Our brain is wired. You've probably seen this at some point in time. It pains us more to lose $5 than it brings us joy to gain 20. And that is completely irrational in a world of behavioral economics, but that's actually how our brain works. It hurts more to lose. So in the world of contentment and in that sort of vein, what I would say is exactly what Terry said is when you said no, or if you have this fear of missing out, what grounding yourself in your mindfulness and looking at those trade-offs, what are the positive things that you were experiencing? And really being grateful for those positive moments. Hey, yep, I said no to going out to the bar, but here's what I said yes to. I said yes to me. I said yes to this. I said yes to getting my work done, and now I feel content. I said yes to staying home and having a healthy dinner. I said yes to this. And really looking and asking yourself, what did I say yes to? So, the same concept of if I'm saying yes to something, what am I saying no to? Flip that around. If I'm saying no to something, what did I say yes to? I said yes to me. I said yes to this. I said yes to this. That's going to help you start shifting towards that gratification, happiness, to more of a contentment mindset, which is actually a really, really positive, healthy mindset. All right.
I love that. And I love what Cheryl just said here. Commitment or contentment originates inside, whereas happiness is connected to external things. And it's so online with what you said that we feel like we're chasing happiness like it's a destination, whereas contentment is just kind of a way of being. And so I've over the last 30 years, I've consistently ratcheted up my way of being. So my median, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? My median level of who I am is easily 20% more joyous and happier and more content than most people because I continually focus on how do I just level this up and find more joy in the dumbest, littlest things, right? I have a post that says, be more easily amused. You'll love
I like
life
that.
more,
Yeah.
right? So I allow myself just to giggle at some of the dumbest crap you're ever going to see because now I'm laughing like a 3-year-old. And this is I forget the exact numbers, but it was ridiculous. A 3 or 4-year-old laughs like 1,000 times a day. A 40-year-old laughs like 20 times a day. It is so far out of whack how much joy we find in the moments we live. And that to me is the entire secret, right? When we're on our deathbed at whatever age that may be, and we're doing that retrospective of our life, we're not going to remember days, weeks, months, years. We're going to remember very specific moments. So your job is to find joy, happiness, contentment, amusement, whatever it is that you're looking for in as many moments over the course of a day as you possibly can. Once you stack up as many of those joyous moments, as soon as they overtake the number of negative moments or bad times, you're going to end up going, well, I had a good day. Because
Mhm.
of that philosophy, I haven't had a bad day since 2008. And I can tell you all kinds of shit that has happened to me day in, week out, right over that time. But every single day, I figure out how to find more joyful moments than not.
I love that. I really, really love that, Terry. You know, we're often very easy to say we're busy. Oh, it's been a rough day or bad day or anything else like that. And
By
that's
10 a.m.
well, and that's one of the things that we've seen the research on gratitude. We've seen what the impact it has on our brain. If we can even take in a moment, if we're experiencing that, that feeling is legitimate. It's okay to have that feeling. But take a moment, take a breath, and look and say, but I woke up this morning, but I have a family. I'm safe. I have a roof over my head. I have food. I can go to the refrigerator and get food. Whatever those things are, really look at those things and say, am I safe? Do I have things? Are there positives? And if you can shift your brain just a little bit from that perspective of I'm down to, okay, but I have the resources to overcome adversity. That's where stress and anxiety, actually, people that don't experience a lot of stress or anxiety, it's usually because of a confidence in their resources to handle adversity, not because they don't experience adversity. And that's really, really important distinction.
That's exactly it. So I want to tackle this conversation about I'm hearing about work-life balance, and people are using that as an excuse to not get things done. And it's an interesting piece. And Jay, your story about working with that professor at Wayne State University who loaded you up with 17 number one priorities every single week. Um, I think to some extent, as a boss and as a leader, we have to make sure that we are resetting those priorities and communicating them clearly, making sure that they understand that, yes, I told you this was super important, but this just superseded it, and give them permission as to what they can slack off on and what they need to handle by giving them direction on that. I also think that there is a work-life balance thing that is real, and we need to attune to, not atone, attuned to, and make sure that people are doing that. But, we can't have work-life balance without some level of work balance. And we need to make sure that we're trying to make sure that people are enjoying the time there, but also getting their things done. So making sure that they understand what the actual assignment is becomes really, really important. And as it changes, those expectations need to be clearly communicated. You have a team of people that you work with all week long. How do you address that?
And that's so part of, I'm going to say that I have a little bit of a privilege and a luxury here, and my team will tell you this. Where I think we are as a company can be very, very different than, say, in a healthcare organization or an organization that has a lot of restrictions or rules or anything else like that. We actually provide pretty much permanent flexibility. So my team might be working in the morning, they could be working in the evening, they could be working here, they could be working there, they could be doing it in the office, they could be doing it out of the office or anything else. They have that flexibility. What we're clear on is our goals, our mission, our vision, and putting that into their space. So if they've got to leave for a 3 o'clock appointment because they have to pick up kids, awesome. I don't care. I don't need to know that or anything else like that. And it'll come back to me. Not every workspace has that privilege. So I do want to acknowledge that that's a privilege that we have in the type of work that we do. Where I think you nailed it, though, is the question of expectations. The behaviors that we tolerate in an organization become normal. The behaviors that we don't tolerate or that we take action on or correct, those are the behaviors that set the culture. Now, there are some people, I do agree, and I have seen this in different organizations, of some people that maybe take advantage of permanent flexibility, or they take advantage of something like this concept of work-life balance. The number of people that do that is actually far fewer than what would be expected. And usually, when I see an organization's culture that has gone the wrong way, it's because one person did that and that behavior was tolerated at the beginning. And that normalized that behavior for other people to follow suit. Okay. Think about you as a person. If you had unending flexibility and you loved your position, you loved your job, you felt the mission, you felt the vision, you'd probably still do a great job. That's how most people are. They want to achieve mastery. There is some level of us wanting to be purposeful or purpose driven. So here's what I would say in terms of being able to kind of create harmony with that. Find out, and I did see, and I'm glad that you had some conversations, some clarifying conversations in that question, Cheryl. Um, is this a person that is a high performance person? Is this a person that gets the job, they want the job, and they're capable of doing the job? If they're not, I know it sucks, but maybe they're going to be happier in a different position in an organization like mine where they have ultimate flexibility. Us being able to draw boundaries and say, here are the clear expectations of what performance looks like. We want to support you in your path to having this balance, to having this integration, to feeling like you can be psychologically safe and authentic. But here's the things that really need to occur in order for us to be successful. And if we're successful, you're successful, we're all successful. That's how you get promotions, that's how you get raises. So we all want to be in the same team here, right? Being able to have some of that kind of here's the expectations. What is it about these expectations? Don't fit with your work life balance. Well, it's too hard. It's too much work, too much energy, too much this. Okay, well, then maybe this isn't the position for that person. And that's a difficult thing to say. But guess what? That's also drawing a boundary and being able to say, this is what I need. You're not performing to what that need is. How can we help you get there? If you can't get there, then maybe I need to draw this boundary and find somebody else that would find a value in this position or find that expectation to be a reasonable expectation. I'm not saying they're wrong. Maybe that's not a reasonable expectation for them. That's okay, but that means that we're not aligned. So, how can you set the expectations, generate alignment, and then stick to that sort of behavior? You've got to be able to commodify that. If you normalize being able to just kind of do whatever it is that you want to do, guess what? We've created the conditions for the culture that we are now living in. So, hopefully that helps.
And Taylor, I think what Jay just said, it works going up and going down, right? So when we have subordinates that we need to talk to and have that conversation, it's definitely going to feel easier than when we have leaders and we have to go in and say, these are my expectations. These are the things that I'm looking for. How can I still be effective and do this job in a way that's meaningful and impactful for you and the organization? And maintain my own level of sanity because there are weeks when I'm giving you far too much of my energy and time, and I don't like it. Now, you probably aren't going to be that direct. Most people aren't. It would depend on the relationship and who that supervisor is. But if you can have that conversation plainly and clearly and concisely, you can get the feedback from them so that expectation can be reset and leveled for both of you. I remember 26 years old. I had a little whiteboard. I was in my first office. I was very fancy. And I remember writing the rule of ALTE, ALTE, always level the expectation. Because when we do that, there's no surprises for anybody. So definitely keep that in mind.
I love that. Alte, ALTE. I'm going to keep that, Terry. That's a great takeaway. So we're here at the end of our hour. I'm gonna my last tip, the thing that I'm gonna offer is gonna address Celeste's earlier question about like how do I create some space to make that choice? And then I'm gonna ask you for what's your final tip for drawing that healthy boundary. Celeste, here is what I would suggest, and this is actually universal. If you need some support in being able to draw a healthy boundary, I want you to take these two practices into place. The first thing is think about the Amazon shopping cart. There's a reason why they make it so easy for you to get to the end of the line and click the button and purchase. Because the longer something sits in your cart, the less likely you are to purchase it. Okay. So when you're finding yourself in that hyper, like, oh, I want to say yes to this, I want to say yes to this, I want you to literally put the shopping cart into your brain right then and there. What that is going to do is it's going to give you a signal in your brain to take a step back. Let's walk around a store a few times and really make the determination, is this something that's worth the trade-off of my dollars, worth the trade-off of my time, worth the trade-off of my energy? So visualization can be a really, really powerful tool for us to take a step back and just give it a second. People, even if it's in the middle of a conversation, sometimes we can say, let me think about that. I have to check with my calendar. I have to do this. And then let me get back to you and see if that's something that's really going to fit with me. Or, hey, you know what? I want to take just a moment to analyze this a little deeper and ensure that this is something that's going to be a healthy choice, a healthy yes for me. Okay. And that's the second tip. Behavioral scripts. I swear by them. If then statements. If I'm asked and I'm excited, then I will ask for 5 minutes to decide. It is as simple as that. If I'm asked and I get excited, you know what your triggers are, you know what those internal states are. Give yourself the then statement to create some space. That space is so important. I guess there's a third tip that comes in. You're worth it. You as an individual are worth it. Take that moment to really evaluate, does this serve me? Is this going to deplete me later? Am I going to regret this? I loved earlier what Francesca said, am I going to be mad at myself for making this decision later? Give yourself that moment of reflection and be prepared with some of those if then statements or some of those things. This may not necessarily serve me right now. How else could I do this? Or how else could I achieve that? Or what else could I do to be engaged, participate, and maybe at a smaller level? Okay, so that's my tips on the way out. Terry, what are yours, sir?
I've never gotten any smarter in the course of 5 minutes, so I always take my time and wait until tomorrow, right? Let me get back to you tomorrow. That's a great question. That sounds really interesting. I'm sure I would enjoy that. I'm going to get back to you with a response tomorrow. I have a message from Benji that I owe a call from 3 days ago because tomorrow ended a while ago, and it's not something I really want to do, but he's somebody that I want to support, and it's an important thing for him. And so it's not important for me. So I'm not interested in doing it, but I love the guy, and I've never shown up and been disappointed in going. I shouldn't say never, but rarely is that ever the case. But yeah, man, I tell people all the time, I will let you know the answer to that tomorrow. Is that okay? And zero times has anyone ever said, no, I need to know right now. Okay, well then if you need to know right now, it's a no. And I'll figure out whether or not the FOMO is going to be overwhelming later. And normally, if there's something that's so cool that I said no to, I plan something that might not be as cool to go do to take my damn mind off of it. And it becomes a pretty simple equation for me. I love this discussion. We didn't really talk about the elements at all. I'm assuming that watery people have the hardest time saying no. And I'd be, with the last 14 seconds, is my assumption right, Jay?
I think that your assumption is probably right. In our research, we do find it is a little bit more difficult when we have that strong connection to somebody to draw a boundary.
Good for you, Cheryl. I love that. Awesome. 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 Well, take us home, my good man. And, happy belated birthday, boy.
Well, thank you so much for joining us in this lunch and learn and for the kind comments. I see a lot of people saying, hey, this was on point, definitely needed right now. We hear you, we see you. Reach out to us. Let us know what you want to see as a topic. What are some of the areas that you'd like for us to really dig into some of the behavioral science on? But again, thank you so much for your time and your energy for saying yes to being here to hopefully give you the skills and the confidence and the permission to draw those lines that are going to give you the opportunity to essentially live your best life. So until next time, friends, we wish you the absolute best and don't hesitate to reach out to Terry or myself if there's any way that we can continue to support you. Until then, be well.